Some time ago, a right-winger friend of mine asked me if I felt any white guilt because of how I look. He was trying to create drama around privilege, white privilege to be exact, something that he vehemently denies could possibly exist.
The city of New York, Boricua from the Bronx.
Well, I personally don't feel any guilt for being white passing Latino. I look the way I look, and that cannot be helped. My parents, siblings, grandparents, they don't all look like me. Therefore, though I present this way to the world, it is not the self-identity that I carry. I don't live my life thinking I am a white man, but I do recognize the privilege that my white passing appearance affords me. I walk the world with the knowledge that my great-grandma and my grandma were Afro-Latinas, and their blood flows through my veins. I have uncles who present as black men to the world. Their lives came from the very same womb as my parents who later created me. Yes, I look like a white person to an extent, but I am well aware of my family roots and the blood that runs through my veins. Please don't misunderstand me. I do not bear any ill will towards white people or how I look. I actually kind of like how I look. But at the end of the day, I simply don't have any control of this. I am who I am. However, I do recognize how the world perceives me as opposed to others in my family. I think that it is so deeply ingrained in us as a society that we may not even notice our bias. For instance, when I was a young kid, I thought that I was one of the good-looking kids in my class. No one ever said to me, no one ever taught it to me. I just thought I was one of the good-looking kids by default. Society subconsciously instilled within me a sense of being good-looking because I had straight hair, light skin, and white passing features. It was never taught to me. It was just something that I thought it just was. Following that same train of thought, I believe that the kids who looked like me, but had even lighter eyes, blonde hair, and fairer features were better looking than me. No one ever taught me that this was what it was. It just seemed like a fact that existed. The girls liked them the most. They got the best part in plays. They were treated better by teachers and staff. And that's just the way it was. It was never taught to us. No one ever said it to us in words. It was never spoken. In fact, on the other end of the spectrum, I'll even tell you that my peers will beat the crap out of me because I looked and acted white. You see, where I come from, going to school, doing your homework, staying out of trouble, speaking proper English, that was perceived as acting white. I remember one time these guys tried to set my hair on fire after lumping me up a little bit. Now I managed to get out of that gauntlet, and when I ran away, they screamed, "Get that effing white boy." It was never taught. It was just the way it was. Mind you, this was all occurring in the hood, among mostly Latino and black kids. But even then, within that poor microcosm of society, white privilege was prevalent and already ingrained in our psyche. The fact that these kids hated white-looking people and made me pay for that despite not even knowing me or that I am not white is another unfortunate side effect of that same coin. Because whether or not those kids were told, and in some cases they were probably told, they were somehow taught that being white is right. How can a person say that white privilege is not real when I was experiencing it before I even knew what it was? I didn't even know it was a thing. By default in our society, even in Latino and Black society, by default, the kids who look like me were simply treated better in our own society. And it's the same in our own countries. That's messed up, but true. Now, what else other than white privilege can account for this? And I'm not even talking about the self-hate that some of our people have because of society and the things that have been ingrained in us. One time I saw this video where they were asking little girls which doll was cute, and they all picked the white doll. Those were children, tiny, young children. When I think back, even the nicknames that we gave each other reeked of white privilege. There was a kid who was called on the street Bamboo. Back then, I simply took it for granted and I really didn't think anything of it. I didn't know better. I just thought that's his street name and he must be cool with it. Everybody called him Bamboo. That was not his name. He never corrected any of us, and it would be years before I ever learned his real name. By the way, for those of you who don't speak Spanish, the name Bamboo, it means big lips. That's what it literally translates to in English. And that wasn't the only name. There were others. Some names that I'm not even willing to repeat them. I shared this one to let you guys know how it was, but I don't take any joy or pleasure in repeating that name that this guy had. And I don't know how he felt about it. He just went with it. I mean, he never told me his real name. He was never introduced by a proper name. This was the name that we were all given, and it's just what we use by default. That's pretty messed up. So all these years later, it simply cannot be a coincidence that this thing called white privilege is real. Back then, even though it was unnamed and undefined, it was the very same thing that I was experiencing back in the 80s as a kid in the hood. And again, it was never taught to any of us. We simply thought it was a fact. It was never said, it was never written, it was never reinforced. It was just how society was. I remember once we were involved in this big gang fight. And as we dispersed and ran away because those other guys pulled guns, I got caught hopping the train by the cops. That and other times, my boys would jokingly say, "Don't worry, Angel, they won't lock you up. You look white." I didn't believe it. I didn't think anything of it, but lo and behold, they never locked me up. At most, they let me go with a ticket. My black and darker Latino friends, they'd get in trouble for things that I would not. For similar or even lesser offenses, they'd pay a higher cost. Even where and how we lived differed greatly from how white people lived. As I just mentioned, policing, which is still very much an issue, also reflected that privilege. Funding, education, after-school programs, everything was different for us in the hood. I had a colleague that I worked with on the trading floor who once asked me, "What do you mean you didn't have a soccer stadium in your school, Angel? Doesn't every school have one of those?" He was shocked to learn that we did not, but I was not surprised. Like I said, it has always been present in everything around us. Privilege. Still, it is not a surprise to me that those who benefit most from this white privilege would deny it even exists. It's no surprise to me when they say we are racist or hate white people for even implying white privilege is real. I think the fear that some, I say some, white people have is that by acknowledging that white privilege is real, they would lose that unwritten superiority within our society. Or maybe, in some cases, they simply can't even see it. Remember what I said earlier? I was never taught that I was better looking when I was a kid. It's just the way it was. The whiter you looked or appeared or were, the better you were treated in the world. This applies to the hood, not hood neighborhoods, other countries, and so on. It is prevalent everywhere. I'm glad that I have understood this privilege myself, that I have understood that it applies to me. I walk the world with the unique perspective of being a poor ghetto kid with mixed Latino blood in my veins who looks like a white guy. And every chance that I get to raise awareness that this white privilege is real, I do. I try. It's not easy, but I try. When someone makes a statement that they wouldn't dare to make in front of a black person, I take that moment to correct them on it. Hey, what makes you think you're safe saying that around me? What makes you think that I would be cool with hearing that statement? Just because I look how I look? As I mentioned very early on, I don't walk the world thinking that I'm a white man. Now, mind you, that's not to say all white people are racist. And it's not to say that all white people are talking about blacks and Latinos and Asians and everybody behind their back. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that I've been present when people have taken liberties that they would never dare to say in front of a black person, and I confront them and ask them, what makes you think it's okay to say that in front of me? It's on all of us as members of society to address these things. All peoples, all of us, should work towards the same end. This will go a long way to making society a better place for all of us. Thanks for listening.
You are listening to the NYC Talking podcast. www.nyctalking.com. Please like NYC Talking on Facebook. Please follow Angel R Talk on Twitter and Instagram. We are NYC Talking, the realest lifestyle blog ever. Thanks for listening.